Let's bring into the conversation former Democratic Congressman Tom Malinowski of New Jersey, MS Now reporter Will McDuffie, live from Manhattan's Inwood neighborhood. On set with me is MS Now chief political reporter Chris Jansing. It's great to have all of you with me this morning. So, Will, I'm going to start with you. These races have pitted Mamdani and his allies against the establishment. Give me a sense, though, about how voters are processing all of it, what the energy is like on the ground right now.
Well, Antonia, we've seen some voters come here. You know, it's not great weather today, which doesn't bode well for high turnout. And we've seen reports of low turnout compared to last year around the city. Mamdani, though, appeared this morning with one of those socialist-endorsed congressional candidates, Darialisa Avila Chevalier, and he was touting all of his endorsed candidates in his slate. Take a listen.
I think what we have here is an opportunity to elect partners to help fulfill our affordability agenda. I've spoken to New Yorkers time and time again about my focus being the transformation of the nation's most expensive city into one that they can afford. And we can only achieve that if we have partners in Washington. And in Darialisa, in Claire, in Brad, I see those partners.
Now, I asked Mamdani if he personally has anything on the line tonight, and he didn't engage with me on that. But there's no question, Antonia, that he and the Democratic Socialists of America are facing a key litmus test tonight, because Mamdani didn't have to endorse any of these candidates. None of these districts is in jeopardy of falling to a Republican. Democrats are assured of winning it, but he put his political capital on the line. He's rolling the dice with these candidates, two of whom are Democratic Socialists, and we'll have to see exactly how that turns out tonight.
Yeah, Chris, you and I talked about this, how much Mamdani is putting on the line here, staking his reputation, his influence is really being put to the test, whether he wants to comment on that right now or not.
Right.
But one of the other elements here with Mamdani as this sort of unique political figure that sometimes has drawn comparisons to Trump, I would say, is the sort of turnout factor here. His ability to get voters who would normally stay on the sidelines out in that mayoral race. People are going to be watching today with all this bad weather. Well, what does the turnout ultimately look like? And when Mamdani himself isn't on the ballot, but he has made his partners, his allies very clear, can he still get all those people to the polls?
Yeah, this is the key question, right? Because let's not understate it. When he became mayor, he blew up New York politics, and he had a couple of choices. He could play it safe. His popularity was on the rise. He didn't need to, again, endorse somebody, but he decided not just to endorse three candidates, but two of them who were running against incumbents who were highly influential. And so when you look at his turnout in early voting, and that's all we can compare, we don't know what voting today is going to be. Last year was 400,000 early in-person voters. This year, 172,000. Now, that might be to be expected, but over the weekend, and they knew that the turnout was low, not just among young voters, because the average age was 57, now was 47, so it's gone up 10 years, but just in sheer numbers, that the success that they had in bringing out new voters was critical for him to do what he wants to do. What he wants to do, what Zohran Mamdani wants to do, is expand the Democratic Socialist agenda, not just in Albany, New York, because he has also given his endorsements to a number of assembly candidates, but also in Congress.
Tom, I want to get your thoughts on the broader issues at play here that are also driving a lot of the conversation in these races, but also pushing some of the voters who are showing up right now to the polls. Foreign policy, the role of AIPAC, what's happening in Israel and in Gaza, front of mind for many of these voters, a key issue in many of these debates, even in New York 12, where you could argue that that's a race that's much more about AI and other factors than, say, in the Lander-Goldman matchup. But the issue is very much there, and it was there for your race as well. So I want your sort of big picture thoughts here on what New York might be telling us about these issues across the country.
Yeah, well, candidates are being squeezed from both sides on that issue. I was attacked by AIPAC in my race. They spent $2.5 million to defeat me. At the same time, I think with some of these ultra-left candidates, we're seeing the mirror image of AIPAC on Israel, intolerant, unwilling to allow for any middle ground position on the issue. The woman, Darialisa Chevalier, who was pictured with Mamdani just a moment ago, will not condemn Hamas. which is not a pro-Palestinian position, in my view. It's maybe a performatively pro-Palestinian position, but not the position that a serious person concerned about human rights in the Middle East would take. And that really, really troubles me. I think Democrats need to be the party that takes government seriously, the responsibilities of government seriously, not a party of social media shitposters, to put it very, very bluntly, who take extreme positions and who scare off the voters that we actually need to do the most important thing this year, and that's to take back the House.
What do you think it means, though, that this younger generation of candidates who have, as you mentioned in the case of Avila Chevalier, these sort of controversial posts in their past, that they're putting up a real fight against these establishment candidates? I mean, Espaillat has served for years. He is a well-known figure in New York politics, deep alliances and ties in his community and beyond. So the fact that she's put up this fight against him, is there a lesson moderate Democrats do need to take from the fact that he's had to campaign so hard against a person who just a few months ago most New Yorkers did not know?
Look, I do think on one level primaries are healthy, and so yeah, it's good that he has to work hard to hold his seat. But I also think, you know, if progressives are going to run candidates against incumbents, can you please run serious people who are for Medicare for all, who want to change our policies in the Middle East, but who actually have some experience, who are not out there calling for literally abolishing police and prisons and seizing private property and stuff that just, you know, most Americans, including most progressive Americans across the country, are going to react negatively against. So for me, like this is a failure of the progressive leadership in this country. Political courage right now is not about standing up to the establishment. That is literally the easiest thing for any Democrat in any primary to do. Political courage is telling people on your side sometimes things that they don't want to hear. Don't go too far. You can condemn the Israeli government. You should be condemning Netanyahu. But if you cannot condemn Hamas terrorists who torture and kill Palestinian civilians, like, don't be running for Congress. Don't take positions. Don't spend all of your young life taking positions that you then have to completely repudiate when you're running for Congress. But that's your only record for being there. And I would look to folks who I respect, like Senator Sanders and Mayor Mamdani, to exercise a little bit more judgment in the candidates they promote, because they have enormous influence over young voters.
Tom, I do have to say, Chevalier has actually condemned Hamas. I do know the other posts.
No, she refused to do it in the New York Times interview that she did repeatedly. She was asked to do that. That's not a hard thing to do. And again, like I really welcome the fact that we're talking about foreign policy and congressional campaigns. I've spent my life in foreign policy and defending human rights around the world. But if your only issue is Israel, I think that's a red flag. And, you know, just as if, you know, you're concerned about dark money in American politics and your only issue is AIPAC and not the crypto groups, not the AI groups that are also very active in other New York races, that's a red flag for me. So I think we can do better than that without telling progressives don't fight for your issues, because they should be fighting for their issues.
Well, Chris, I want to bring you back into the conversation here, because you've had conversations with party leaders. You've also been out there speaking to voters. You have a sense of how everyday people are metabolizing some of these debates that are raging in the party at large. And I guess I want your thoughts on, like, the nuts and bolts of it. Like, what is it truly about for people? Is it about Israel? Is it about AIPAC? Is it about money in politics more broadly and the way people see cash spent overseas while they're suffering here at home? How does the average person actually understand the relationship between their domestic experience and what they see happening abroad?
I don't want to discount the importance of the issue of Israel and obviously AIPAC specifically, but it wasn't AIPAC that gave completely $40 million to the New York 12, which is an unheard of amount of money, $10 million to other congressional campaigns. And I will tell you, as I talk to folks, particularly voters, they are incredibly concerned in a way. I don't have that experience of talking to voters this way about not just the influence, what are those people buying for the money that they're giving to the candidates, but also candidates themselves. We are seeing an increasing number of candidates who are self-funding, spending $100 million on a congressional race. And that opens them to, and we'll see how successful they are, charges of you're trying to buy your way into power. But there's no doubt that the idea of dark money in politics, of untraceable money in politics, a group like AIPAC and what individuals aligned with them have contributed to some of these campaigns are things that people are looking at in a way that they never have before.